Sadaşivasamārambhāṃ
Samarambaṃ
Shankarācharyamanyamāṃ Asmadācāryapariyantām Vande Guruparampārām. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryan Karvavahai Tejasvinavadhitam Vishawai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tat Sat. Om Namah Shivaya again. So we'll continue with the verse which we have not completed. That is verse number 21 of the second chapter. So I will chant it and please chant it after me. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Veda Vinashinam Nityam Yenam Ajam Avyayam Katham Sapurushah Partha Kam Ghatayati Hantikam. So I'll just mute it here. And to briefly, we were talking about the means of knowledge called pramanam. We had discussed certain aspects of the mantra. Now we are talking about the Shat Pramanam, the 6 means of knowledge. And we said they were Pratyaksha, Anumana, Upamana, Arthapatti, Anupalabdhi, and Shabda or Shastra. We also talked about the conditions that a pramanam must fulfill to be called a pramanam. And if you recall, they were Vishaya, Anadikatvam, Abhaditatvam, and Arthavatvam, and Jnana Janakatvam. These 5 conditions are necessary for some means of knowledge to be known as pramanam. And we talked about the fact that the first 5 pramanams are operatable only by human beings, and therefore they're called Paurisheya. And the 6th one, Shastra, cannot be operated by human. It's called a Paurisheya. And we had discussed, I think we had discussed the first 3 pramanams, and we were to come on to Arthapatti, right? So we are continuing with the discussion on what is Arthapatti Pramanam. So Arthapatti means a supposition, a presumption of a fact. Okay. So it is an assumption of some fact in order to explain some perceivable fact that cannot be explained otherwise. The classic example that Shastra uses is Devadatta. Devadatta is the name of a person whom Shastra uses all the time. Okay. So this Devadatta, he is known to you, let us say, and he is a person who is fat. He is very, very stoutly built. He is very, very plump.
Oh, Maharaji.
Yes, please.
Sorry for interrupting. Someone mentioned in the chat that if the recording is going on, can you please check if it's being recorded?
Recording is on, very much.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean,
sorry.
the first thing that happens is that computer now says recording in progress. Okay. All right. So you know that you are with this person who is a person who is fat. Now the classic, this is a very classic example used in the Shastras. Now the example states that you are with the person from morning till night. You're not staying with him. Okay, you're a friend and you meet outside and you are with him from morning till night, and you have seen over your association with that person has been a long one, and you have seen that he never eats when you are with him. From morning till night, he does not eat. So that is a fact. The fact which you can see is that this person is fat. And because of the fact, which is also perceived by you, that he does not eat during the daytime, what is the arthapatti, the supposition that you must make of an unknown fact to account for the fact that he is fat,
That he is eating
At
in the
night.
night.
that
Eats
is
at
eating in the night. Okay, so this is arthapatti supposition, that you are supposing a fact which you don't know, but it is only by supposing that fact that you can explain the two things which you know, which you have perceived. One is that he is fat, and one is that does not eat during the day. So arthapatti is a derivation, an assumption based on what you know. So this use of this method is there in Vedanta for correctly understanding, very many Upanishadic statements. Like there is a statement, the Brahmavid, he transcends grief. He goes beyond grief. Now, what do you see here? You see here that just the knowledge of the Atma, it destroys your grief. Okay. Normally, something which is real needs to be destroyed by something, some action, not by knowledge. For example, you have, let us say, a black spot on your nose. Just by knowing that there is a black spot on your nose, that black spot is not going to go away. You have to actually take a wet cloth and rub it. So karma is there to destroy what is real. But here we know that knowledge alone destroys grief. What is arthapatti?
That we're doing actions to gain knowledge.
No,
Brahmavrit is knowledgeable.
no.
It's not real. The world is not.
Sorry?
The world is not real.
No, we are talking about grief over here, right? So
Yeah,
if
grief is not
so
real.
grief is not real, is the arthapatti. Because knowledge can destroy only that which is a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding means it is not real. The other example is of the Sarpa and Raju, of the snake and the rope. If the snake was real, then the knowledge of the rope would not have destroyed the snake. But the snake goes away the moment you understand that it is a rope. And therefore, when mere knowledge destroys something, you have to know that that thing is unreal, it is mithya. So this is use of arthapatti. It's a very important concept to use, and it is called a pramanam. Okay. Then the fifth one is anupalabdhi. What does upalabdhi mean?
Availability.
Availability. Anupalabdhi means non-availability or non-perception. Now, how do you use this as a pramanam? It is extracted from statements like, there is no teacher in the class. That knowledge of somebody being absent is also a knowledge, right? But that knowledge is not derived from perception of something. It is derived from the perception of that thing not being there. So of the non-existence or the non-availability of the teacher, that is called anupalabdhi. Right? Other things are, this flower has no fragrance, right? Actually, it's a paradox, right? Because you are saying that the non-perception of a thing is the means to the perception of its non-existence. You're a bit technical, because you are not seeing a thing, you are taking it as evidence of the fact that it is not there. And that is why it's called anupalabdhi, one of the means of knowledge. But the fact remains that both upalabdhi and anupalabdhi, both perceiving and non-perceiving, are means for getting knowledge. Is that clear? Even when you don't perceive something, that thing, the perception the understanding, the knowledge of the non-existence of that thing, the non-availability of that thing, that is also knowledge. And that is why it is called Praman. Any doubt on this? Slightly confusing, that's why I'm asking.
Sir, can you give another example from the Shastras?
I give one. Devadatta is one. If Devadatta is not there in your house, then you will say, I do not see Devadatta. So the fact that you don't see Devadatta is the knowledge that he is not there.
No, sir, I meant what we are learning in Gita or in Tattva Bodha.
No, this is
From there.
basic. This is basic Vedanta, okay? Basic Vedantic concepts. And when they are
Okay.
applied, then I will tell you how they are.
Okay. Okay.
And the last one is Shastra Pramanam, also called Shabda Pramanam. So here, the first five you necessarily are born out of human intelligence and logic. Shastra Pramanam is said to be alaukika. It is a paurishya, which means not attributable to a human hand or a human mouth. And therefore, it cannot be verified. Right? It is not subject to logical verification is the point. And that is the very essence of Shabda Pramanam, Shastra Pramanam. That knowledge must be definite knowledge, but incapable of being verified by any other Pramana, including logic. Okay. For example, if I say that darkness vanishes when I put on the light, you don't need to accept it as Shastra Pramana. Why?
Because that is direct. It's pratyaksha.
We see that.
It is verifiable, right?
Yes.
By putting the light on, you can see for yourself that darkness vanishes. It is verifiable. So you cannot classify that as Shastra Pramanam or Shabda Pramanam. The second thing is that normal knowledge, any Laukika knowledge, any worldly knowledge, it reveals information about the world, not about you, the observer. Okay. Anything, any worldly knowledge reveals knowledge only about the world, about objects in the world, about the observed, never about the observer. Shastram reveals knowledge only about you, the observer. It does not reveal any knowledge about the world. So from this, you can have a corollary. All sciences, worldly knowledge, they deal with that which is observed. And since that which is observed, that's a very important statement, that which is observed cannot exist without the observer. Okay, that which is observed, that which you can see, will not exist without the person who is seeing. And therefore, science dealing with that which is seen does not have access to the seer, to the observer. Therefore, no science can ever deal with you, the Atma, because you are the observer. Then, since the knowledge is not worldly, not available to science, it cannot be either proved or disproved by science. Any attempt to prove the words of the Veda using science, which a lot of people do, they think they are trying to defend the Veda, but they do not understand the very basic idea that Veda is talking about a subject which is not available to science. So science can neither prove nor disprove. Then lastly, there is something called Shraddha. Okay, now this Shraddha in the Veda, it is not blind. Our Shraddha says that if the Shastra words are definitely true, and We also say that Shastra words should not be capable of being proved wrong either by science, which is pratyaksha, or by logic, which is tarka, or by anubhava, which is experience. Now, if any Vedic statement cannot be disproved by either pratyaksha, tarka, or anubhava, which is by perception, by logic, or by experience, then what have we got over here? We have simply got the statement that these words cannot be proved untrue. They cannot be proved as false, and therefore we accept them as true. This understanding that if these Shastra Vakyams cannot be falsified by using pratyaksha, tarka, or anubhava, then I am going to accept Shastra as pramana, as the truth. That attitude is called Shraddha. That is why in Tattvabodha you had definition of Shraddha as what? Guru Shastra Vakyeshu. Right? So the Shastram as revealed by the Guru, you accept as true, not blindly. You apply pratyaksha, you apply tarka, you apply anubhava, and then you will see that they cannot disprove, and therefore you say, I accept the words as true. Now, this is diametrically opposite to people who have got a very strong belief in their scientific thinking abilities. They say that whatever is not provable is not true. But that itself is a logical fallacy. Do you see? When something cannot be disproved or something cannot be proved, that is the extent of the statement, that I cannot prove its existence. Proof of non-existence is not there. But these analytical people, they take the absence of proof, which is the inability to prove, absence of proof, as the proof of absence, which is quite illogical. It goes against all scientific tempers. You cannot say something is absent simply because you cannot prove that it is present. Does it make sense? Okay. Now let us, for example, take Pratyaksha, Anumana, and Shastram, three different pramanams which we have discussed. And you have a Shastric statement. You have a Shastric statement which says what? Which says that karma generates adrishta phalam. Okay. Or you have the Shastric idea that the upasana of Saguna Ishvara will take you to Swarga. These are all Shastra Vakya. There is no way of using Pratyaksha Pramanam for this knowledge. Because karma is drishta, of course, can be seen, but the phalam by definition is adrishta phalam. Remember, karma also generates drishta phalam. Okay, this discussion we'll do in another time, another point of time in this study. Karma generates two phalams, drishta, adrishta. Adrishta phalam obviously can be seen. Adrishta phalam cannot be seen. And therefore, Pratyaksha Pramanam cannot be used for proving that karma generates adrishta phalam, nor can it be used for disproving that karma generates adrishta phalam. Can you use Anumanam? No. Because when Pratyaksham is not available, Anumanam also is not available. Every Anumana, every inference depends upon some perception. And therefore, if perception is not available, inference is not available. Therefore, Pratyaksha Pramanam and Anumana Pramanam, perception and inference fail to disprove that karma generates adrishta phalam. Are you following the logic?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. What is left? Shastra Pramanam. Shastra Pramanam, we say there is no blind belief involved. We say we are open to examining the Shastric statements, the Shastra Vakyam, very logically. But as I said, most of the people who oppose the Shastram, who don't believe the Shastram, they simply say that you cannot prove it. Our answer is very simple. You cannot prove it, we accept. But unless you can disprove it, we accept Shastra Vakyam as true. And as I said, most people will tell you that you cannot prove all this that you are saying, so it is untrue, which is logically a fallacy. What cannot be proved is simply that. Cannot be proved. Absence of proof cannot be equated to proof of absence. This is what you will find the argument that most people use when you talk about Shastra. They say you cannot prove God, so it doesn't exist. You have to say you cannot disprove. So they'll say yours is simply a belief system. You believe that God exists. Belief has no logical basis. You can respond saying yours is also belief. Because when you say I cannot disprove, therefore it does not exist, that is also a belief. So yours is also unverifiable belief. Mine is also unverifiable belief. Mine, I accept Shastram as true. Yours has a logical fallacy. You are saying absence of proof is equal to proof of absence. That I do not. That I say is incorrect. Logically itself it's incorrect. And this is why Shraddha is very important. So as I said, we have, as Vedantics, we have to accept that Pramanam is true. I'm just going to mute you all without option to unmute because somebody is continuing to mute with themselves. Okay. So I'll, when I finish, I will let you all ask the questions. So we accept the words of the Veda as true, we said, providing that it is not contradicted by logic, which is called yukti, anubhava, which is called experience, and shruti, any other vakya. Okay. Now here you can come across a problem. Logic and experience, yes, I can understand, right? Logic cannot prove or disprove. Experience cannot prove or disprove. Experience also covers pratyaksha because you are seeing. Okay. But shruti, what about shruti? You will find that many statements in the shruti, they contradict other shrutis. And you will find that many shruti vakyams contradict smriti vakyams. So as you know, we have these two major levels. Shruti is the Veda, smriti is the other texts like Bhagavad Gita. Sometimes you will find that the statement from shruti will contradict the smriti. And sometimes you will find that shruti will contradict other shruti. So there should be a rule and Shastra of how to deal with these contradictions, right? If we have to be logical about it, we are saying that we are supporting shruti with logic, that we do not accept that logic can disprove, and therefore we must have some sort of rules. So the first rule is that when there is a contradiction between the Veda statement, shruti statement, and a smriti statement, for example, if an Upanishad statement contradicts a Bhagavad Gita statement, so Upanishad is shruti and smriti is Bhagavad Gita. Supposing that happens, it doesn't happen, supposing it happens, then we say that shruti statement takes precedence over smriti statements. That's the first thing. Between shruti, smriti contradictions, the shruti should be accepted as true. What about shruti contradictions? That's interesting. Because in a shruti contradiction, that shruti vakyam, that shruti statement, which is backed up by logic, that takes precedence over any statement which is not backed up by logic. Okay. So shruti and smriti is clear. Shruti takes precedence. Shruti, that shruti statement which can be backed up by logic, that takes precedence. Okay. So let me just unmute you here in case you have any questions. All right. Any questions so far? So there's you or something to say. You opened your hand.
Pranamacharya.
Yeah, Pranam.
Is,
Tell.
is there any such example like where the Shruti contradiction is there?
Yeah, when we start to study Upanishad, we'll come across it. So then
Okay, sir.
that time we'll discuss in detail.
Thank you.
Sudesh Soniji, you put up your hand. Is there anything you want to say? No. So I'm lowering his hand. Anybody else?
Acharya ji, before Shruti versus Shruti, you said Smriti versus Smriti?
Smriti versus Smriti, no. Shruti versus Smriti.
No.
And
Ha,
Shruti
and
versus Shruti.
Shruti versus Shruti.
Shruti.
So is this an example of Anu Uplabdhi that
No,
we
no,
are
no, no,
talking
no,
about?
no, no. This is logic. Pure all contradictions. Okay.
Oh.
Fine. So now just unmute yourself and we can go to the next verse, which is verse number 22. And you will see here that the meter changes. The chanda changes. It is the same chanda as in the previous verse, as in 20. Vasamsi jirnani yatha vihaya.
Vasamsi
जीर्णानि
yatha vihaya.
Navani grannati naroparani.
Navani grahana naropurani
Parani.
Tatha sharirani vihaya jirnani.
Tatha
Sharirani vihaya jirnani.
Anyani sanyati navani dehi.
Anyani
Yati
sanyati
dehi.
Okay, so some people I heard saying samyati. Why is that wrong? It is sanyati, not samyati. Why is that wrong?
The anuswara is followed by yakara.
If the anuswara is followed by yakara, you have to, the anuswara sort of merges into the ear and therefore it becomes a nasal sound. It becomes sany. Samyati is not wrong. Okay, some people do pronounce samyati, some of the traditions, maybe the north and all that, but it's okay. We are following a particular tradition, so we say sanyati, but if you are saying samyati, it's not wrong. I mean, so there's nothing wrong and right. It's preferable to use the word sanyati. Okay, so I'm muting you all now. Let me come to the grammar part. So here we are now on 22nd verse. So vasamsi jirnani yatha vihaya navani grannati. Then the naroparani, the avagraha is dropped. It becomes naraha aparani. Then tatha sharirani vihaya. The word is jirnan yanyani. So that is to be broken up. Sandhi breaks up into jirnani, anyani, sanyati, navani, dehi. Tatha sharirani vihaya jirnani, anyani, sanyati, navani, dehi. Those are the word breakups. The anvaya is yatha naraha. So remember that whenever there is a yatha, it should be followed by what?
Tatha.
Tatha. That is the connecting clause. You must always look for that. Yatha naraha jirnani vasamsi vihaya comma aparani navani grannati comma tatha dehi jirnani sharirani vihaya comma anyani navani sanyati. So yatha Just as Naraha, the person, a human being, Grannati, puts on or takes up, Navani, new, Aparani, other, Vasamsi, clothes. Okay, so Yatha, Naraha, Grannati, Navani, Aparani, Vasamsi. Just as a person takes up new, other new clothes, when does it take up? Vihaya Jirnani Vasamsi, having given up. Vihaya Jirnani, old, Vasamsi, clothes. So Vihaya Jirnani Vasamsi, just as a person having given up the old clothes takes up other new clothes. That is the Yatha clause. Then Tatha. Tatha, in the same manner, Dehi. Dehi is the one who is in the Deha. Deha में जो रहता है उसे देही कहते हैं. So the one who is in the body is Dehi. Sanyati. He takes up or he gains Anyani Navani Sharirani, other new bodies, when Vihaya Jirnani Sharirani, having given up the old bodies. Okay, this is the word meaning, fairly clear. Just as a person gives up old clothes and puts on other new ones, in the same way the Dehi, the Jivatma, gives up old bodies and acquires new ones. So Krishna here is talking about Punarjanma and Maranam. Maranam and Punarjanma. What happens to Atma at the time of death and rebirth? Now this Atma is me, right? Jivatma, I am. So it's a natural question. When this, this event called death, Maranam, or again rebirth, Punarjanma, when these two events happen, what exactly happens to me? So this is the question which all of us would have had some time or the other, at least at the time when we came to understand that we are not the body. This question comes up. So Krishna says, don't worry. Don't you change your clothes. Birth and rebirth are exactly the same. What is a cloth? What is your shirt or your gown or your dress? It is a superficial, external covering on you, which is not you. Before you put on the dress, before you changed into a new shirt or a new gown, you existed. When you put on the new gown, you exist. When you remove the new gown, you still exist. And therefore, when you are there all the time, what is coming and going? Only the dress is coming and going. And when one dress is removed, what happens? It goes for a wash and you put on another dress. All changes belong to this external superficial covering which you call dress. You do not change at all. The content of the dress does not change. Because when I have changed my dress in the morning, I don't say I have changed. I'll say I have got a fresh dress. So remember, what he's saying is that whatever changes is only the superficial, temporary thing. The essential you, which is permanent, cannot change. And he applies this to birth and death. Every time you are born, you get a new body. It only means that just like you put on a fresh shirt, you, the Jiva, is appearing in this world freshly dressed. How long a person will remain dressed? It depends on your prarabdha karma. So some people change, like some people I know, they change their dress every 2 hours. Depends upon how many clothes they have in their wardrobe. Depends on whether they are fashion people or normal people. So some people change morning, evening. Some people have morning one dress, daytime one dress, night one dress, varieties of dresses. And therefore, similarly, jivas take physical bodies, which is the dress for the jiva, live there for some time, and when the use of that body is over, they discard the body and pick up a new body. So this is what is being mentioned here. Vasamsi jirnani vihaya. Vasamsi, clothes, jirnani, old clothes, vihaya, giving up. The person gives up the old clothes. Why? Because it doesn't serve the purpose anymore. And then what does he do? Without a dress, you cannot go and meet your friend, right? You cannot have a transaction. Therefore, he puts on another dress and goes out. So, navani, aparahani, vasamsi gannati. He picks up other dresses, fresh clothes, and goes out. What does every jiva do? Same way, he uses this physical body for some time, and after some time, when it becomes old and disease-ridden, it is of no use to society as well as to yourself. That body has become a burden. So that jiva decides that this body is sufficiently old. Let me, discard it. Let me give it away, and I will take a fresh body. So tatha, the same manner, jirnani sharirani vihaya, the old bodies are thrown away by the jiva, and then you put on a new dress, and then you come into the world again for a transaction. Anyani sanyati, another new body is attained. This jiva takes, this dehi takes. Again transactions. What will happen? Sukham dukham, punarapi jananam, punarapi maranam. So you can look at this verse from two different angles. One is Tattva Bodha. Sthula Shariram, Sukshma Shariram, Karana Shariram, and Atma. So Tattva Bodha talks about 4 components of a jiva. Sthula, Sukshma Shariram, Karana Shariram, and Atma. There are 4 components. At the time of death, what we call death, remember that only one of these components goes away. What is that? The physical body alone, which means the other 3 will survive the death of the body. Sukshma Shariram continues, right? Karana Shariram continues. Atma, of course, continues. And along with the Sukshma Shariram, all the vasanas, all the punya papam, all of them continue. So when Sukshma Shariram and Karma Shariram themselves continue, what to talk of Atma? Atma will definitely continue. So this Sukshma Shariram, what will happen? This Jiva, whom we call Sukshma Shariram, which is the mind in other words, it will travel to another place, take up a body, new body, and experience pleasure and pain. So Sukham, dukham, anubhavam, it must do to exhaust prarabdha karma. After the new body falls, again the shariram travels to acquire a new body. Is it random? No. All the travel is according to a particular law. What is that law? The law of karma. So if lot of punyam is there in the account, then you get a good body, a good environment, right? If I have a lot of money in my account, I can travel business class. But if I don't have a lot of money, I might have to travel by 3rd class train also. And therefore, depending upon the punyam, the travel occurs. So we say, punyena punya lokam praptihi, papena papa lokam praptihi, ubhabhyam manushya lokam prapti. Do you understand? What does it mean? What does it mean?
Ravi, can you please repeat it, Ji? Please.
Punyena punya lokam praptihi, papena papa lokam praptihi, ubhabhyam manushya lokam prapti.
Ubhabhyam.
Ubhabhyam means both together, mixture of both.
If you do punya karmas, then you will get punya loka.
Yes.
Swarga, if you do pap karma, then you get
Papalokam. Or
pap.
lokas.
And if you,
Remember, when you are saying lokam, you are saying lokam in a particular sense, you are going to get a body in that lokam. So when you say Vabhya Manusha Lokam, you are saying that you are going to come back into Manusha Loka with a Manusha body. Right? Here it is not that you will be animal. It is Manusha body. Papena Papa Lokam. So the Papa Lokam is supposed to be Adho Lokam. Bodies which are lower than Manusha. That is the cause of Papa. So what you are saying is that if there is abundance of Punyam, predominance of Punyam, you will get a body which is either a body in the Swarga Lokam or a body in earth itself, but a very good birth. Lot of money, lot of Punyam, lot of opportunities for Vedanta, such stuff. But if abundance of Papam is there, predominance of Papam is there, then you may be born as an animal also. But if it's a mixture, roughly equal proportions, then only do you get a human birth. Okay, so that's very important. The human has a mixture of Papam and Punyam. And therefore, that is why both Sukham and Dukham have to be experienced by the Manushya. Okay. So what happens to Jiva, the Sukshma Shariram after death? It travels according to this particular law. What about Atma? Where does it travel?
Atma is everywhere. So why will it travel?
It doesn't travel.
And therefore, because it is all pervading, it cannot travel. What does all pervading mean?
It's everywhere.
Everywhere. And what is everywhere? Where will it travel to? Like space. We don't say space moves. Why? Because everywhere there is space. And if space has to move, it's got to move into a place where there is no space, which is illogical. Since we say that space is everywhere. So Atma cannot travel because it is Sarvagataha, all pervading. We have seen all these definitions earlier. What travels? The Jivatma travels. One body appears, it goes away. Another body appears, it goes away. Atma remains without change. Therefore, Dehi remains. Atma remains the same when bodies appear and disappear. So we have to say exactly, actually to say that bodies appear and disappear in the Atma. Atma doesn't change. It is exactly like, building a new house after breaking an old house. When you break the old house, the space inside, it remains. It does not move. It does not travel. The space continues to be the same. Your old building is gone. Another building has come up. And now you say there is space in my new building. Space has not gone anywhere. And correctly, if you say, you have to say, logically, you have to say, the building has come up in space. So space is both outside and inside. Because of that seeming limitation of the walls of the building, you say there is space inside. Similarly, Atma. Because of the seeming limitation of your body boundary, you say, I've got an Atma. But actually, you are in the Atma. Similarly, like the building, the body may come and go. Atma continues to be there. So one day I have a human body. The next birth I might have a donkey body. But Atma is the same. It doesn't go anywhere. Atma remains. Monkey body comes and goes. Donkey body comes and goes. All bodies come and go. But I, the Atma, I do not go anywhere. I do not have Punarjanma. I do not have Maranam also. In short, the destruction of the Deha, the body, cannot be avoided because it is the nature of the body to be destroyed. Number two, the Dehi cannot be destroyed. So, if you see, this is the answer to Arjuna's earlier question. And when Arjuna was grieving, what Krishna is saying that, hey Arjuna, there are two parts of you. One is the Deha. That Deha will necessarily have to be destroyed. Therefore, It is the nature of the body to die, and therefore, what is the cause for grief? Why are you grieving about something which you have no control over? It is not wise to do so. The other is the Dehi can never be destroyed. Either way, there is no cause for any sorrow. Right. So this is what is the meaning of this particular verse. And here a question may arise. How do you say that Atma cannot be destroyed? This will be answered in the next verse. But right now, if you have any questions, we can devote the time for that.
Acharya, how can Dehi not be destroyed?
Dehi is Atma. When you break the building, does the space get destroyed?
Dehi is not Dehi body.
No. Dehi is that which is in the Deha. Deha is the container. Dehi is the content. The space in the bottle. Shastram uses the word Ghata Akasha, the space in the pot.
Acharya ji, Dehi is the Atma and Deha is the physical body. Am I right?
Correct.
Thank you.
Acharya,
Yes, Kumarji, boliye.
Acharya, why is it not possible for us to remember our previous births? What form did we have in our previous births?
Relationships are always between physical bodies. There is no such thing as a relationship between a subtle body and subtle body. And therefore, since the same physical body is not available with you, there is no reason for you to remember anything about your previous birth.
So when we
Sorry.
Tell me, one person at a time, please. Yeah.
So when we say soulmates, that doesn't have any meaning.
It doesn't have any meaning. It's an English word. It has no meaning at all.
But Acharya ji,
Please go ahead.
okay, yeah. But Acharya ji, when I was born and I was little, my mother used to say that I used to talk about, things which were probably related to my previous birth. And then they discouraged me, from talking about it and carrying forward with it, because they thought somebody will just, abduct me agar aise main bolti jaungi bahar. So I mean, when you say changing clothes,
Yeah.
you are still interacting with the environment that you are in. So does it? I mean, there are things that are talked about. There are documentaries which say that these things happen, that you do remember previous birth, or sometimes you do come across the atmas from the previous birth and you interact with them in the current. So as somebody just said, soulmates. So does that happen? I mean, do the Shastras talk about it at all?
See, Shastra is a logical, what they call exposition on all these things. So Shastram tells you that your body is for what purpose? What is the primary purpose of your body?
Exhaust your karmas.
Work out the karma.
To work out prarabdha karma. Okay. Now, in this bundle of prarabdha karma which you have got in this life, which is the reason why you have got this body, and because of the same prarabdha karma, you have got certain types of relatives, you've got certain type of husband or wife, you've got certain types of friends. Everything boils down to that prarabdha karma, which is the bundle for this birth. Okay. When that karma is exhausted, it means what? Death for the body. And therefore, that death is on the exhaustion of the prarabdha karma. And therefore, all the linkages which you have get severed there, because that karma which caused those linkages is no longer there. Therefore, Shastra says that in the next birth, whatever body you get, it is dependent upon the fresh karma. There have been certain, again, this is not in Shastram, okay, but some interpretations have been that supposing your death is terminated by suicide, your life is terminated by suicide, it's a volition, it's an act of will on your part, where you have refused to let prarabdha karma complete its course. In such cases, maybe, it's an interpretation, okay, maybe that unfulfilled prarabdha karma will come back again basically as prarabdha karma.
There is a question, as you said, suicide. So is it also not because of prarabdha that I had to go to my death? Okay.
That is against free will. You always have the, you know, the free will to say, no, I will not commit suicide. It just means that you do not have the strength to face the circumstances.
Raviji, the strength itself is given by our karma, isn't it?
No, it is not. It is based on your
Our one's
intellectual thinking, on the clarity which you have about why I am in this world.
Shastri, see, now we are talking about grief. So everybody is attached to the physical body, sthul shariram.
Yes.
So when the physical body goes away, grief is bound to occur.
No, it is not bound to occur. If you understand that the physical body is basically got a particular nature, then I always take the example, right? A dog barks at you outside. Do you get angry with the dog?
No.
Why not?
It's
because you know that its nature is to bark. Therefore, there is no reaction from you. At the most, you can protect yourself. That's a different matter. But there is no reaction from you. Emotional reaction is not there. That same way, if you are able to assimilate the fact that this body will die because of its very nature, it is nashvar. Shadvikara, the last shadvikara is nasha. You know it's going to die. How can your grief have any practical use? If you assimilate that properly, you will be able to understand. Why does grief come? Why do you not grieve when somebody in Iraq dies? That is also a body dying. But because you don't know the person. So the grief arises out of your attachment. That is what we said in the first part of the chapter. Attachment is one of the worst things that you can have.
Thank you.
Yes, Amita, tell me. You raised your hand.
Acharya, I have one question.
Yeah.
Our body destroys, but the mind and intellect goes, with us. Because I have seen many child prodigies and reincarnation, and people remember their previous birth.
Okay, I'm not disputing all that. The point is that in this stage of the teaching, there is no reason for you to believe that in a reincarnation you will remember your previous birth. Because for one thing, in every birth, supposing you remember everything, let us say last 1,000 births you remember. How many people do you dislike in this birth? Let us say
innumerable.
10. Innumerable. There's 100 people you don't like. And that you remember all of them. Now in 1,000 births, you want to remember 100,000 people whom you don't dislike. Nature protects you from that. So only those which are useful for you for transaction because of prarabdha karma, only those people you will remember. For all you know, the closest person to you today is the same jiva who you hated in the last birth. But the bodies are different and therefore interactions are different.
Thank you.
So Acharya, when we talk about karmic debt, maybe in my last janam I did something, and is there any truth?
Your karma is over with that. There is no debt. If you have a karmic debt, what you do? You have to understand it as sanchita karma. So there is no such thing as karmic debt. Whatever you did, it goes back to sanchita karma. It will fructify sooner or later. So again and again, I will tell you, please try not to, pick up these statements from English books. Karmic debt and this. There is no such thing. You have done a karma. If the karma phalam has not come in this lifetime, it is bound to come in the other lifetime. That is what you are meaning by karmic debt, but don't use that word.
Okay.
It's simply sanchita karma.
Thank you.
Which
That sanchita karma will convert into prarabdha karma at some point of time.
Raviji,
Yes,
is there any modality like to know how many more births does one have, or does the heart? No, I may be absurd. Sorry. Or is that written in our horoscope that this many birth and
it is
you have no?
dependent upon your effort. If supposing it was written in my horoscope that I have 25,000 births, why should I take the effort to do all this, scripture and shastra study?
No, some astrologers predict that this is your last birth and the
But
Madre.
logically, supposing that you have a written number of words, 25,000, let us say.
Okay.
Right? Why would you take the trouble to study and to do nididhyasanam? You can lead a very happy life because after the 25,000 births, you're automatically getting moksha, right?
Oh,
if
for each.
moksha is assured, then nobody will ever do any spiritual study.
So there is nothing like anybody can find out whichever birth we are in.
No, astrology sometimes tell you this is the last birth. That they look at where you are. Do you have the inclination in this birth?
Oh, that maybe is a little bit inclination towards which can be read by those people.
Yeah.
Okay.
That inclination will show up. But if you are, for example, I can, most of you, if you go to astrologer, they will tell you this is one of your last births. Why? Because you're studying. That inclination to spirituality is visible. That is what astrology says.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Ji. Thank you.
Okay.
Ravi Ji, I have a question.
Yeah.
When you were explaining the shloka, you said you would explain it with two different perspectives. One was the Tattva Bodh perspective. What was the second perspective?
That I think we will come to in future verses. There are two perspectives always. One is this, and one is the Vedantic perspective. Okay, so we have a number of verses to do. Second one we will see sooner or later.
Thank you.
Acharya ji, do you believe in astrology?
Not much. According to astrology, I should have had 3 wives by now, but I'm still on my first. So I'm still waiting. Yeah. So,
even I don't believe.
So even you mean to say, Ji, that we can change our fate by logical thinking?
Not logical thinking, by good karma. If you cannot change your fate, then Shastram has no meaning.
Okay. And free will also.
Yeah, that is the thing. Free will is the tool given to you, not given to any other living being.
True.
That using that free will only you can decide to change.
What to do, yeah.
That is the
very
crux.
true.
The fight between free will and fate, we will discuss that in great detail in the next chapter.
That's really great.
Acharya ji, how does an animal do good karma to get a birth in Manushya?
Animal's birth is a bhokta birth. Experience only.
Okay.
The only birth in which Shastram says in which you can do good karma is the Manushya birth, not even in the God birth. Every birth excepting Manusha Janma is Bhoktra birth only for experiencing the results of karma.
So once you are in animal birth, you cannot.
No, you will simply experience all the bad karma, all the papam. And then again, Karma Phaladatta will decide what is your next birth, depending on what is there in the Sanchita karma.
Acharya ji, I have a question. So what defines punya and papam? How should one lead our lives to accumulate punya? What would be righteous living really?
Righteous living basically is ensuring that, number one, your actions do not hurt anybody. Number two, you follow the Vaidika instructions in the Vedas. So remember, you can be a very good person and generate a lot of punya. But there is no scope for moksha unless you are studying Veda. They are two different things. A good person, an ethical person is different from a person who is the sadhaka. They're often confused. A lot of people say that, oh, I don't do anybody any harm. So I'm a better person than you who are studying Vedanta all day. That we need to be sure about.
So people from other religions will eventually be born into this religion and study Vedanta
Not
and
necessarily,
then get
not necessarily. Any thought, any scope, any school of thought which talks of there being only one entity, the unity of existence, that is Vedanta only, right?
Right. Okay.
Yes, Lataji, boliye. You have raised your hand.
Yes, sir. Question is, now, is there something called fate versus karma? Because, your karma only decides your fate, right? So ideally, why do we usually, or probably here, what's the difference?
Your prarabdha karma decides the environment, the circumstances which you face. Your free will decides how you will address that circumstance. The combination of both decides what is going to be the future. So that's a very brief reply.
Astrologers can actually go ahead and I didn't understand. So astrologers can actually go ahead and tell us what's in our fate?
No, they cannot. I mean, I told you I don't believe too much in astrology, okay? But the point is, they can possibly indicate that this is the direction, but that need not necessarily be true, because a large component of your future is not prarabdha karma, it is your current action. So you have prarabdha karma defining the environment, or you can say defining the problem which you face. The problem which has come in front of you is prarabdha karma, but how you attack that problem is your free will, and therefore it's combination of both these things that decide the future. There is no such thing as fate. That fate is a mixture of these two forces. We'll discuss this also in great detail in chapter 3. So we will park it. All these are all very useful discussions which we'll have in chapter 3. Okay, Ayushi, please.
So how does Prarabdha get selected from Sanchita for each lifetime?
That is, unless you are Karma Phala Data, you won't know.
Okay.
Karma Phala Data decides.
But there's no criteria on which it is decided even by Karma Phala Data, like randomly.
There is only one reference in the 6th chapter where Krishna says that once you have started walking on the path of spirituality, once you become a sadhaka, then he says, I will ensure that you will not have a lower life, which means you will have a human life every time until you get moksha. That's only the only guarantee ever given.
Actually.
Then what is
Very
this
good news.
concept of 7 births, 7 human lives and all that, which is very popular?
Nothing in the Shastra to validate that.
Okay.
Sir, a question. So Ravan was a very, very learned man. Ravan was a epitome of Vedanta, and then he obviously did a lot of papam as well. So how do we define him? Of course, he was killed by Ram, and they said that was a big punyam because, unka udhar ho gaya. So now this is contradictory. He was a Vedantan, supposed to be the most learned man, and still he was generating papam. Isn't that contradictory?
Yeah, so the Ravan's 10 heads are supposed to be the state of your mind. If your mind is in 10 states, then maybe one state is correct decision and 9 are incorrect decisions. So you're likely to make incorrect decisions all the time. So Uddhar ho gaya is basically, it's Quranic, right? It is just trying to tell you that if you're killed by a lord, it is fine. And for that, there is no validation Vedanta which says that if you get killed by a lord, then you get moksha. That is not validated by Shastra. So these are all stories just for encouragement.
Acharya ji,
yeah.
Who decides what is the time to change the body?
Your prarabdha. When a prarabdha is over, the body dies.
So it is. It's not that the body has gone old and that's why it is being changed.
No, when the body has gone old, it has gone old through experiencing prarabdha. That is why some people die young.
Some people die. Some people die at very young age when their body is also good, and they die because of accident.
So prarabdha. That is why prarabdha.
That is prarabdha.
Okay, we must stop now. So.
Sir, one last thing.
Yeah.
Sir, can there be any death apart from suicide? Can there be any death that can happen?
Can everybody mute themselves and unmute everybody? Then you can just unmute and talk. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
Sir, basically, I want to ask that can death happen only when prarabdha gets exhausted, apart from the suicide thing?
Yes. There are two ways. One is you kill yourself. The other one is prarabdha gets exhausted.
Okay. So basically, if somebody dies, which is not by suicide, then the inference is automatic that the prarabdha had got exhausted.
Yes.
And if there is a murder
also, we normally say prarabdha. It could be exceptional case, in which case, again, this is an exception where your unfulfilled, what they call relationships or karmic, prarabdha karma will fructify in the next birth. It's rare, but mostly we talk about suicide only.
Sir, murder thing, I didn't understand what you're saying.
I think mostly there are only two ways. Prarabdha was over, body dies. Suicide, body dies without prarabdha being over. In some cases, it has been said that unnatural death, that is, murder or something like that, also could be body dying without prarabdha, exhaustion. It's very rarely said, but it is said some people. So we don't really know. Shastra doesn't say. These are all interpretations.
Okay. So basically, in case of murder, the prarabdha might not have got exhausted.
May not have got it. But again, that's interpretation, right? It's not there anywhere clearly by any renowned acharya. This is all which you hear here and there by people who, are making statements.
Or otherwise, we can also think that it's the prarabdha because of which the murderer came and...
Usually, yes. That is the correct interpretation. Because the only other thing is free will. And that is why suicide.
Okay. Thank you.
Acharya ji, even natural calamities...
that is all part of collective prarabdha. Collective prarabdha. So, in collective prarabdha, you are also part of the collective. And therefore, it is end of your prarabdha also.
Okay, thanks.
Acharya ji, one last question I want to ask you about the righteous action where one should not hurt. But there are some situations where one people is hurting and one people is happy. So how do you select that? Who's to be happy and who's to be hurt?
Who selects? You have to select yourself. If you are going to be hurt by somebody else's actions, it is your fault, not anybody else's. Nobody has the capacity to hurt you mentally. Physically, yes. Mentally, it is up to you to say no.
No, Acharya ji, when we take any action, either somebody will be happy and somebody else will be unhappy. In that situation, what to decide, like whom to make us happy and not to make happy?
It's a too general statement. You have to go by what is right. So whenever these doubts are there, you should go by Shastra.
Okay.
For that, you have to wait till the 16th chapter, where he says go by the Shastra only. So with this, we'll stop here. If you have any other questions, please put them in the group. I'll answer. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnagacchate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavasishyate Shanti Shanti Om Tat Sat Om Namah Shivaya.
Thank you.
Thank you, Acharya ji.